I want to talk about the crimes that I'm going to talk about. So in green is what I'm going to talk to you about, which count 51 is criminal street gang. Count 50 is criminal street gang of defendant Stillwell. He's on the right, and Kendrick is on the left. And count 1 RICO applies to both. So both are charged with the murder of Donovan Thomas. Kendrick has this count 57 participation in criminal street gang activity for the marijuana and firearms, like street gang activity during the commission of a felony for the May 9th, 2022. These street gang charges, which I'm going to talk to you about at the end, pertain to the murder of Shamel Drinks, a gang-related murder that the evidence has shown Shannon committed along with Demekion Garlington, Miles Farley, and Quarmavius Nichols. But first, I'm going to talk about RICO, which is count 1, which both are charged with. So I want to talk to you about conspiracy in general. And I definitely think the microphone's working now, Your Honor. So one crime, you rob someone, you do an arson, you would look at that case, did they go and set fire? Did they go and steal? One specific place, time, and perpetrator. You've already heard about a conspiracy to do armed robbery when I use that bank robbery analogy. RICO is no different in terms of this. The general concept is they're charged with conspiracy to commit racketeering. So I'm going to have to explain to you what is RICO, what is conspiracy to commit RICO, and then you as jurors, with the evidence that have been presented, will reach the only reasonable conclusion that they're guilty of that count. But you need to know what RICO is first. And there's 2 ways to violate RICO. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it bite by bite through RICO so you can understand the 2 ways that RICO can be committed and what conspiracy to commit RICO is. And we'll walk through this together. I've already explained conspiracy in general. Now, this bank, I've used the bank analogy. If this group who robbed the bank, don't have to be some sophisticated mob syndicate. If those 4 are just sitting around and say, let's be the bank robbing boys, maybe we'll sell drugs on the side, and we'll shoot people, the rival bank group, and we're going to call ourselves, the BRC, bank robbing group. If they got tattoos of BRC, they got necklaces of BRC, they say, hey, we are BRC. If they went and all knowingly and willingly agreed to be a part of that, knowing that a pattern of racketeering, which I will explain to you, will be committed, that concept is what we'll be talking about. It's not any different in general. It's conspiracy and RICO. And when you put the 2 together, that's what they're charged with. So let's walk through this. This is from the indictment, which you will have with you when you deliberate. I'm not going to read off this right now, but page 12 of the indictment is an important page. It lays out what the state alleges the criminal objectives of the conspiracy are, and that they violated, there's a subsection A and a subsection B, which we're going to talk about. So remember page 12 of the indictment, because it will come up multiple times. So what is knowingly and willfully joined? Look at what they do, what they say, and crimes that they commit. If you wanted to figure out if the bank robbing crew or if YSL, if someone knowingly and willingly joined them, that's Kendrick on the bottom, with slat on his left forearm and a snake that goes from his stomach to his neck, and YSL a little bit underneath his Adam's apple. Do you think he knowingly and willfully joined YSL? He got a permanent tattoo on 3 different spots of his body, one of which very close to his face. That is something you can use and consider. Oftentimes with criminal conspiracies, they don't have a written contract. They don't have a, you're not going to have that coffee room table. Let's all agree to be a criminal enterprise. We all hereby today on January 1st, 2000. From here on out, we're an enterprise. That's often not how it works. So you got to look at what they say, what they do, and if you permanently get a tattoo, that's a pretty strong indicator if you're willingly and knowingly a part of this. Shannon Stillwell, often wearing clothing, stain stuff. Me and my slimes go up the law. You've heard that and seen that clothing line, which yes, they can play it off that it's just some innocent clothing line, but it says slime. It's a typical human being, like knows it's not some, joke. It's about murdering someone. He's acting violence. So that's Kendrick in the middle, next to a slack graffiti with a red bandana. How they act, say, and do over time, those are the clues to know that someone willingly joined a conspiracy. So let's break this down a little bit further.
We need to switch it.
It's came out again, Your Honor. This is probably the easiest element while we switch this mic. 2 or more conspirators. Oh, thank you, Sergeant. Thank you. So, that, you can't have a conspiracy with one person, right? So, I think we all can agree that should be an element that's easy to check. You've heard from ample, it doesn't have to just be the 28 indicted co-conspirators. You will see in that indictment that it states on page 12 that it also includes unnamed or unindicted co-conspirators, if you find that they're part of a conspiracy. So keep that in mind when you go back and deliberate. But yes, one of the elements, beyond a reasonable doubt, is 2 or more. I think that element, I'm not going to spend any more time on that one. You've heard from ample people you've seen in the witness stand that are 2 or more of YSL. This just illustrates that point. Now, agreement. This is another important element of RICO to kind of understand. How do you know that someone agreed? Like I said, it doesn't have to be expressed. It doesn't have to be where did they sign the YSL ledger. I'm going to join. I'm in. You rarely see stuff like that. There's no such ledger in this case. It's mutual but unspoken understanding. I say actions speak louder than words. If you want to know how someone believes or if they agree, what do they do? So I'm going to show you some examples of agreement. And a lot of the evidence that I'll talk about, it has multiple purposes. So we will talk about and you will see what can prove agreement can also prove if they knowingly and willfully join. Let's see. I'll keep working on this now. So,
You can just hold one.
yes, Your Honor. Sounds like it's working now. So, what else can you use? Remember we talked about circumstantial evidence? So, circumstantial evidence inferred from the nature of the acts done, relation of the parties, and the interest of the conspirators. What do they have to gain? Is it for something to further the group's interest? How do you know someone agrees? Look at what they do. And I argue to you that the evidence has shown that they've all knowingly and willfully agreed. Take where we started, or take the 2 murders. Shannon Stillwell, January 10th, 2015, murders Donovan Thomas. March 14th, 2022, Shannon Stillwell, with 3 other YSL members in both times, murders Shamel Drinks. If you have to ask yourself, did he knowingly and willfully agree to be a part of YSL criminal enterprise with 2 gang murders? That's an easy question. That's the most clear example of if someone murders a rival gang member twice, I think it's pretty clear that they knowingly and willfully agreed, regardless if they signed on the dotted line. Same with other crimes and acts.
The same shit that got Biggie and Tupac killed, little fuck, nigga. Pussy ass, nigga, get your bitch ass killed.
YSL for life, nigga.
Yeah,
Can't come that long.
Hey, gang, you bring your pussy ass down here, you gonna see me. I'm at your fucking neck. Fuck anybody.
So again, what do they say? I mean, this is Kendrick and Wooney Lee. You know, you have all the Make America slime again. You have Kendrick with YSL pennant. And you have Shannon Stillwell where someone in the background says YSL for life. That's just one example. You've obviously seen and heard from multiple. But what do they say? What do they do? Are they publicly or actively or oftenly saying, yes, I'm a part of this YSL, there's an us and a them? Yes. I think it's pretty clear that they have. Now, some of this I've talked about, actions or evidence. So let me give you a concrete example we saw just a couple weeks ago with Viverito. So, YF and Lucci flyer. This is from Marquavius Huey's phone where him and Jeffrey Williams, they send the text message, the flyer of Lucci. In 6 text messages, this principle of agreement, you're going to see agreement in action. This text is about to come up where all that's said, right? Flyer, Jeffrey Williams says, where's that at? Claremont, slatty handle, stay very low, slat for sure, been out the way. They didn't say murder. They didn't say stab. They didn't say shoot. But in 6 text messages, it's readily clear that they're talking about enacting violence on YF and Lucci. That's agreement in one, barely a screen of a text message. That principle shows you, and think about this example throughout. What do they say with one another? What do they do with one another? That's how you can know agreement. It's just like you all have family and friends. You may text one word, and they know what you're saying. I'm heading home. You don't say the address, right? Agreement can be inferred with very little words, especially with people who know each other very well. And YSL has its own lingo, so they don't have to say much. Slatty handle, he knows he will handle it. Other examples. What it does not require. I've covered most of this. It doesn't require, like I said, physical meetings, even though we have that in this case. Knowledge of the details of the conspiracy. I argue we have that in this case, considering that Kenneth Copeland, Quindarius Zachary, Walter Murphy, all of these individuals have given statements with evidence that's been corroborated that real crimes happened in real places and they knew about it. So a lot of these, you don't have to have them, but you actually do in this case. The last one, the identity of all the co-conspirators. You wouldn't have to know if you had 200 members of YSL. I don't know the exact number, but you wouldn't have to know every single one. Obviously, I argue to you that they know quite a few because you see the same individuals speaking, talking, and acting in concert together throughout the case. But none of these things are necessary to reach agreement. So, and there's a slight lag on this Zoom with this clicker. So I'm gonna move through this. So at its core, the crime is the agreement. The overt acts let you know that it's real. So this is important. They're charged with conspiracy to violate RICO. So the agreement to violate RICO, that's the crime they're charged with. These overt acts that you've heard from and we're about to walk through, those let you know that this isn't just fanciful, this isn't just in their minds, it's a real conspiracy. And in this case, and we're going to explain what RICO A and B is, they've actually committed the crimes. So it's like you're asking you, did this group of individuals agree to conspire to commit all of these crimes, racketeering activity? The best evidence of that they did is they actually went and shot multiple people, murdered people, robbed for the street gang. That lets you know that there's not much to say when you actually do the crimes that you're alleged to have just conspired to commit. It'd be like if you're asked about the bank robbery conspiracy and all they do is just talk about the bank robbery, get the items, they go and buy a gun, but they never do a robbery. Fast forward, they've done 20 robberies, 50 robberies over a decade, and you're asked, did that group of bank robbers intend to be part of a bank robbing crew? You'd obviously say yes. It's common sense because of what they actually did. That concept is important. Like I said, the overt act lets us know that the conspiracy is alive and well. And I'll argue to you, going back to credibility, the conspiracy is alive and well in this courtroom with deceiving in this witness stand. So this is just a visual explanation that you have Shannon Stillwell, Diamante Kendricks, and some, I didn't list all the photos of people you've seen, but this, the criminal enterprise, visually depicted. So let's walk through what an overt act is. So joint objectives equal joint responsibility. This is like a partnership in crime. Now, to find that someone's act is all the co-conspirators are on the hook for it, so to speak, any act done by any co-conspirator to further the criminal objectives is what counts. So if they're going to shoot a rival and you find that, yeah, they did shoot that rival and they did it to help YSL the enterprise, if that act, and you find that whoever you find as part of that conspiracy, it's like they're all one and one for all. So each co-conspirator is responsible for the acts of others that are naturally and necessarily done to further the enterprise. Now, I've talked about different ways to violate. A, in a nutshell, is to acquire money and property. I'm not going to bury the lead. That's the first way to violate RICO. Conspire to acquire or keep money or other personal property. B, they both have conspire, and they actually have 7 elements each, and I believe 5 of the 7 are the same. So I'm going to explain a lot of these elements we've covered. 2 or more conspirators is one. So conspire to participate in the enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity. If you find the defendant, and on your verdict form it will say the defendant violated subsection A or subsection B, conspired to violate. So I'm going to walk through what is A, what is B. They don't have to actually have committed A and B, although in this case I believe that they have, as I'm going to show you. You just have to say, did they ever conspire? And remember these principles I talked about. The unspoken words, what people do and say is the agreement, or you're not going to have that magic conference room meeting, so to speak. That's all captured where the conspiracy gets hatched. So let's walk through this. We're going to start with A. Keep it easy, keep it basic. And you're going to notice that when I talk about A, some of the acts can actually meet multiple ways. So you're going to see that certain evidence can actually impact multiple ways to violate RICO. So let's talk about subsection A of the RICO Act. Knowingly and willfully conspired with 2 or more co-conspirators to acquire or keep money or other personal property through a pattern of racketeering activity. I'm going to explain pattern of racketeering activity. It's 2 or more crimes that are explained and listed, and you will be instructed by the court on what they are, that within 4 years. And any of the co-conspirators committed an overt act with at least 1 in furtherance of the criminal objective, and at least 1 has to be after May 10th, 2017. So that's A. I'm going to walk through some examples of A, and we're going to take this bit by bit. Armed robbery, Arshillian Bennett. Walter Murphy, Jeffrey Williams. May 13th, 2013. You heard from the officer where she walked with her child from 988 Confederate Court to that zone precinct to report a crime. That takes a lot of effort and time. So I'm going to use this top one while that bottom screen comes back. But obviously she came in here and did not want to acknowledge about the robbery, but I argue there's about to be a real bullet in her window that was taken by a crime scene tech who just responds to a scene. That is 988 Confederate Court, which comes up that address and area multiple times. And she said that she told the officer at the time, her Kel-Tec, the money, her purse was stolen. Acquire and keep money. Now, Walter Murphy, Jeffrey Williams, and she said someone that she didn't know, Jeffrey Williams' brother, that's multiple people doing it. That's 1 crime, 1 act. But when they work together, it's much easier to get property and items. And no one expects Ms. Bennett to come in here and testify. Certainly not back then and certainly not now. But that is an example of acquiring or obtaining money. It's robbery. Derek Dotson, also in 2013. This is 5 through 7. Adrian Bean, the coin laundry, where Miss Marissa Cisneros' car flew over the ledge. I mean, Adrian Bean sat here for what felt like an eternity and didn't remember entire years, but he flew over while driving a car over a 6-foot embankment. Why did he not remember any of that? Just think about that. I think the only thing he said is that memorable moment where he's like, keep it a buck, and he took his mask off. But he clearly would remember flying over a wall. Why are they not coming here and talk about it? Now this, again, Walter Murphy, Jeffrey Williams, that's the location where Leonard Pass's car, which is that gray Dodge right there, is parked, Summerdale Apartments. Obviously, this is in the Cleveland Avenue area because often these crimes are committed in same locations, which will come important later. These are the firearms that they recovered from the car and then this is Mr. Derek Dotson, and you heard from Leonard Pass, who was with him. That's the car that was crashed underneath. And then this is a picture with Walter Murphy, Jeffrey Williams. At the time, he's throwing up rock crew. And if you remember, the background behind this is this slime in kind of green and black font. So, again, it's 2 YSL members acquiring and obtaining, trying to rob Derek Dotson. And again, they're working in concert, working together. Ms. Taravia Hill, Act 61. She's just at her apartment complex, and this car, and if you remember, she only could recognize or ever identified Eppinger, Christian Eppinger, but there was 2 cars and multiple males with him. We don't know who these people are, but I think from what you've heard in this case, it's reasonable to suspect he's working with other people to do the armed robbery. Because again, it's hard to rob someone by yourself. So working in concert, that's Ms. Hill, that's her apartment complex in present day, that's Christian Eppinger from his public posting a firearm on social media, that's her wrecked car after it's found later, and where does the car go? Where Ms. Hill lives to Cleveland Avenue. Where do the guns and the Infiniti Q50 from Donovan Thomas go? They go to Oak Drive, where O.G. Bentley's house is. Common after crimes, they go to the same location. That's important because these same victims, same accomplices, same pattern is important for RICO. So keep that in mind as we walk through this. And he does all of this with, and it's hard to see from here, YSL on his face, no mask. She said, I can't remember if Ms. Hill said I wore glasses or didn't wear glasses, but her eyes are working just fine. And he had nothing covering his face. Think about it. If you walked into Winn-Dixie with a nameplate that said, hey, I'm Christian Atkins, I'm here to rob you, no one would do that. So why would you publicly have the gang on your face when you do a crime? Because a face tattoo could stand out. Because they want people to know. You want the notoriety. You want the fear. Who robbed you? YSL. She doesn't know his name. Think about that. You have multiple people, and Walter Murphy, for those, I don't know the date Walter Murphy got his face tattoo. I know Eppinger had it for this, but Walter Murphy has a YSL on his forehead, right? So think about that public display of allegiance to the criminal street gang and enterprise, and when you commit the crime, because that's important. Now, stolen firearms. I'm not going to show you or bring out every firearm we've introduced, but there's a lot of stolen guns. Think about, we don't know where all those guns came from. Sometimes you heard from the person whose home was burglarized or car was broken into, and you said, yes, this was a report from this location. But, you know, you add these up, it's a decent number of stolen guns. These are all overt acts. You know, Jeffrey Williams, the Sig Sauer, September 9th, 2013. Defendant Kendrick with Arnold when they were riding back into near Trestle Tree Confederate, the same location Miss Bennett lived at, right, on October 1st, 2015, after Martinez Arnold got jumped at Magic City. 40 cal stolen. FN57, that is the stop that Officer Fikes did of Jeffrey Williams and Sergio Kitchens. Why are all these stolen weapons from 2013, 2015, 2017, 2018, 2020, 2015, and 2022, you heard from Detective Liam Packer that it was some train theft from the ATF, that a cargo shipment. That's acquiring or maintaining property, stolen guns. Ask yourself where all these stolen guns come, and you've seen, like when Quindarius Zachary is arrested with the gun on May 7, 2015, that came back with Nibin when Kilgore testified to the shooting of Miss Frida Reed's house. When it matched that, the guns exchange hands. The guns move around, and stolen guns are harder to trace. That's acquiring and maintaining property, and evidence of it. I just included a couple photos because we have a lot to cover, but that is stolen property, all tethered to A. In 2022, right, this is the gun that was reported stolen that right before they went to the house on Meadowlark Drive, it was thrown out and recovered, and it came back stolen. Again, stolen weapons from as far back as 2013 to stolen weapons as recently as 2022. There's common patterns that indicate that they get stolen firearms quite easily. Subsection B. This is where all the violent acts come up. So the first objective, and your indictment's not going to have numbers, is going to be conspiracy to violate subsection B with the state's objective of murder, aggravated assault, and threats of violence. So we're going to walk through some of these so I can explain to you why they further the criminal objectives of YSL. So, simple definition, while associated with an enterprise, YSL, they knowingly and willfully conspire with one or more co-conspirators to participate in the enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity and any of the co-conspirators committed an overt act after May 10, 2017. If you notice, other than what's in green, everything's the same as A. So these same factors and principles will come up for both. So I got to explain to you what is participating in the enterprise and what are these criminal objectives. So we're going to start with the murder, aggravated assault, and threats of violence and go from there. So again, page 12 of the indictment, it outlines the conspiracy. I'm not going to read all this for you now, but it states the Young Slime Life enterprise and what the criminal objectives are right after it. That's where you can find it on page 12 of the indictment you're going to have. These are these objectives. I've removed them from the indictment, but we're going to start with the first one. Murder, assault, threats of violence. And then we're going to talk about robbery, theft, unlawful sale, and distribution of drugs. So let's walk through this together. I just wanted to show you a brief visual of how you're going to have the indictment with you and can look through it. So again, we're going to go objective by objective because it helps to organize the evidence. And objective 1, murder, assault, and threats of violence. So you've heard about pattern of racketeering activity. What is racketeering activity? The good news for y'all is the indictment, anytime you see, it will state, which is an act of racketeering activity, and then it'll cite a statute. This is what explains what racketeering activity is. This is the murder of Donovan Thomas. And you'll see when you are deciding, which is Overt Act 16 through 20, is the murder of Donovan Thomas. When y'all are back there and saying, I want to figure out if something's a pattern of racketeering or figure out if an overt act is a racketeering activity. That will tell you. That's your snapshot. So just look. This is Overt Act 17, which is the murder. 16 is when Jeffrey Williams rents the vehicle. But when you see what's highlighted, you'll know it's racketeering activity. So I just wanted to show that for you. And then we're going to walk through this now. We're going to talk about Donovan Thomas first, Overt Act 16 through 20.
The last one on the line for the 6204.
Yes, there's police over here on the north side of McDaniel.
North side of McDaniel. Why did you
Yeah. At Harold Living the barber shop. Somebody don't got shot.
Mr. Parker, who you testified, who's owned a barber shop there for 20 years. Barber shop right here. And Kendrick, Stillwell, this is Demise McMullen. Now, we'll talk about this in a minute. This is actually the photograph from when they shot Dexter Montgomery. Same case with D'Angelo White when they left that Jonesboro gas station in Lakewood and got to the four-way stop. That's the photograph from that. So you have Nard, but that's Demise McMullen, Shannon, Stillwell, Kendrick. This is obviously the shooting. Overt act is, did Jeffrey Williams rent the Infiniti Q50 and act in furtherance of the conspiracy? When you think about these overt acts, think how the criminal objectives. Ms. Hilton's going to talk to you and walk through bit by bit the murder itself of Donovan Thomas. But I argue to you, as she will too, that has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and that renting of the Infiniti is an overt act that was used to facilitate the murder, and you've seen a pattern of rental cars being used. And ask yourself why. They're harder to trace. People don't recognize you in that car. Now, how is Donovan Thomas's murder evidence of RICO? Well, I'm going to tell you. That's Donovan Thomas. This is about to be Wooney Lee.
Before y'all nigga with slime.
This shit is in blood. We wrote this shit in blood.
I probably had it before slime.
And we also wrote it on nigga tombstone.
We wrote it on a tombstone. And that's Donovan Thomas's gravestone. And when Miss Edmonds, who testified to you about recognizing that, she didn't wipe graffiti, she didn't wipe paint off that tombstone, she wiped a confession. And that confession says slapped. Because that's who it's for, that's who it's from, that's who publicly has acknowledged that murder since it happened. YSL, the criminal enterprise. And that same slap in green handwriting, Defendant Stillwell is posting in, 7 years later in a slime t-shirt right? Peanut stone gray. That's the translation version. He put it in Spanish. Wooney Lee's comment, his comment, they're all talking about and kind of joking sheepishly about a murder of Donovan Thomas. It's we, it's us, it's criminal enterprise. Now, we talked about Kendrick's tattoo, which is about to come up on his left forearm. I don't know when he got this tattoo, when this Zoom works with me and it comes up. I don't know if he had that tattoo of slat on his arm while he's driving the Infiniti 250 past 330 McDaniel Street and Nard and Shannon shot and killed Donovan Thomas, but that same green slat ends up on the gravestone. It's not a coincidence. And they're telling you that they did it, and they just don't care, because as you said when we started, slimes are above the law. But they didn't think about you. Now,
Swear to God, we killed nuts, so they gonna stay on you.
you hear it as clear as I hear it. I swear to God, nobody accused Dolly of murdering Donovan Thomas. Who's the we? And then you hear in the background, we smoke nut. And if you remember that call, right before that, Woody saying, tell your brother I love him. And then you can hear Jeffrey Williams say, tell him I love him. Right there next to him. We killed Nut. We put it on his tombstone. Slat, and then just making a cheapest joke this years later. They're telling you we did it, they just don't care. And that's Shannon Stillwell in that same video, and there's a live snake and a YSL chain. It's out in the open. Beat a murder rap. Now, we're going to turn to Jamari Holmes next, and I'm going to explain to you why that murder that Rodelius Ryan and Damon Blaylock did is in furtherance of the YSL criminal street gang, which is Overt Act 79 through 81, February 23rd, 2019. That's the vehicle that 15-year-old Jamari Holmes was in. This is Rodelius Ryan. This is Blaylock throwing up YSL, which is also an overt act, that public display of allegiance. That's going to come up in just a second. That's Jamari Holmes. You're going to see the message where, where Mariah leaves and she says, or not Mariah, but Brazy, as they called her, text and DMs Ryan and Blaylock and says, they know about Ryan but don't know about you, and allude to Mariah snitching on them. That snitching comes up repeatedly. This is the projectile that was in Jamari Holmes' head that was fired from weapons that Rodelius Ryan and Damon Blaylock shot while they were hanging out with females in Cleveland Avenue. It came to 50 Mount Zion. And then I want to ask you, this is that message. All again, talking about snitching, trying to not get caught. Now, how do you know why Ryan did it? What does Ryan think about this murder? Is he remorseful? Is he sad? Well, here's him that same day at 5 o'clock. So that's the 911 call at 4 in the morning, not 4 in the afternoon, February 23rd, 2019. Bet YSL makes the news FaceTime. You've heard repeatedly about the FaceTime. I argue to you when he says bet YSL makes the news, Fox 5. So he's telling people without having some plausible deniability of no one's going to know what I'm talking about, YSL makes the news. Now, what does he do 5 hours after this? Let's find out.
Block life. Block life, knowing again. 250, knowing again. Bet y'all push nigga can't come up here in that block. Yeah, no cap. Color right, gonna shoot at your fitted. That's no cap.
He's going to shoot at your fitted, and that's the fitted cap that Jamari Holmes wore on his head when he was murdered. That is bragging about the murder. YSL makes the news, and then he's on the quote-unquote block, right? And he's throwing up YSL. Is it a coincidence that this guy he's with says, Little Rod will shoot at your, don't come on this block, and you have Bernard Mitchell and all of them who weren't from that neighborhood come over to 50 Mount Zion, he will shoot at your fitted cap. And there's a literal fitted cap from Jamari Holmes' head with a bullet hole in it, and that's his skull with a bullet hole in it. This ain't, murder gang isn't some facade, this isn't for clout, this is real life. And this is the bragging and the boasting above the law and proving that they're doing it for the street gang. They're telling you, nothing I've said so far with these two murders is anything but their own words. March 14th, 2022, Shamel Drinks. I think it's amply clear that this murder is gang-related. It's to further YSL. You've heard about the Nibin matches, the double homicide of Christian McMiller and Darius Ford. You heard op hunting, all of the way that Garlington and Shannon talked about getting revenge. And what happens? They see an op at a gas station and 4 YSL members in a rented vehicle murder. And Shannon Stillwell is involved in both. And it's eerily similar to Donovan Thomas' murder. This is the corridor right there, and that is Shamel Drinks' vehicle with bullet holes on the same side of his car that Shannon Stillwell's Audi drove up in. It's not rocket science that he did it. The evidence has shown you he did. And it's 100% gang-related. They're both part of the same rival group. There's no evidence about any kind of disagreement or anything with Shamel Drinks. They did it for YSL. They did it to get revenge. And this is just a visual representation where Shannon Stillwell is publicly stating, check the score. Because again, shooting and murder is like a scoreboard, but this ain't a sports game. This is the Superior Court of Fulton County, and you can't go shoot people for sport or murder your rivals to up the score. That ain't how it works.